everybody, and welcome to NFL Live. It's a holiday weekend. We have a great Friday show for you today. So Saquon Barkley, did you hear this? He thinks last year's Eagles team is top 5 all time. Our crew has some thoughts on that. Also, as you know, it's yearbook season, so our friend Bill Barnwell, he's dishing out some superlatives. Find out who received what this offseason. Plus, Derrick Henry. Hey, this man got paid this week. Boomer sits down with King Henry to find out all about his role in the resurgence of the running back position. We have Mina Kimes with us. We have Kevin Clark with me here in studio. And Bill Barnwell, now he's been gone for a while because he and his wife just welcomed their first child. Graham, congratulations, Bill. You getting any sleep? I know everybody asks that with new parents.
More sleep than I get during a typical NFL season. So
okay.
A little worse than your typical off season, but I'll take it so far.
Okay, I guess that bar isn't very high then. All right, meanwhile, the Lions are sleeping a lot better now that Aiden Hutchinson has been cleared to return.
Hey.
The defense took a big hit after Hutchinson went down in Week 6 of last season. In their first 5 games, they ranked top 7 in pass rush win rate. Say that 3 times fast. Sacks per game and opponents' yards per dropback. Then, without Hutch, they ranked in the bottom 6 in every single one of those categories. Here he is yesterday on whether he has some added motivation now returning from injury.
I would say there's motivation not from it getting taken away, but me putting that on tape, and I had a lot of growth in those first 5 games to where I feel like you evolve as a player, and things were clicking at a high level, and I had a lot of thoughts at the time that were like, if I'm thinking about a golf swing, you had the good swing thoughts going on. Like, that's kind of pass rush, and I had these good pass rush thoughts, good things going on, and I feel like that's just going to carry over, and I'm going to continue to build on that.
I really love the analogy to swing thoughts in golf. What are your expectations for that defense with him back?
Well, certainly improved when he's back in the lineup for obvious reasons, one of the best pass rushers in football. I thought that they would add another pass rusher to complement him, though, and I was a little bit surprised. I think that was the expectation a lot of folks had of Detroit. But I think that the way they approached their roster was to help the pass rush in other ways. So starting here, the Lions defense was actually better versus the pass than versus the run last year in just about every metric: DVOA, success rate, EPA per play. So in the first round, they go out, they get a big run-stuffing defensive tackle, Tyleik Williams. I think the hope is they'll be in more 3rd and longs. And then they added to the pass defense the secondary. You add DJ Reed in free agency, Avonte Maddox, Terrion Arnold is a rookie last year. Hopefully he takes another step, and as Registraw gets healthy. So I think their thinking is, if our secondary plays better and our run defense is better, we can help the pass rush and Aiden Hutchinson without adding another pass rusher.
First of all, Mina, I'm not going to talk about my golf swing because this only is an hour show, and I could talk about that for about 10 hours. So I'll just move on very quickly here. Aiden Hutchinson, at the time he got hurt after 4.5 games, had 45 pressures last year. It took TJ Watt 16 weeks to get 45 pressures. This is one of the most heartbreaking injuries we've seen in a long time. I would put it up there with Aaron Rodgers 2 years ago as one of the most devastating for a fan base because of what it means. It robbed us of one of the best NFC title games we've ever seen when you think about the Lions roster and the Eagles roster. But I think once he gets back and he's ready to rock, he is going to change this defense like he did last year. I love this Lions team. I think there are 2 rosters that are clearly above everybody else in the NFC. I would put the Rams a cut below. There's some projection there with some of their young guys, but the Lions are ready to win now in the same way that the Eagles are. So 24 guys on IR. If there's any health regression towards the mean, they're going to be a big year.
Kevin had to bring up regression towards the mean, knowing I was coming up next. Kevin's absolutely correct. Aiden Hutchinson was playing at a Defensive Player of the Year level last year, and the Lions had to change the way they played once he and Marcus Davenport went out. They changed their blitz rate. Aaron Glenn, kind of a guy who usually went into the blitz, didn't have to early in the year. They were 14th in blitz rate before the injury. Afterwards, they were 1st in the NFL in blitz rate. They had to send extra guys because they didn't have the pieces up front. And some weeks that worked out great, but we saw in the loss to the Bills, and especially that season-ending loss to the Commanders, when the blitz wasn't getting home, it was a disaster. They allowed 40 or more points in both those games. And so with Hutchinson now back, with Kelvin Shepherd taking over, over for Aaron Glenn as defensive coordinator. Real questions about what they do on defense. Do they continue to lean into the blitz? Are they a top 5 blitz team? Or do you trust that front four, trust the additions made this offseason that Mina mentioned, and lean into rushing 4, dropping 7 into coverage, being more conservative, but maybe more consistent for the Lions on a week-to-week basis on defense?
Yeah, and I think, Bill, that when you talk about the blitzing, how much they had to and whether or not they can rush with 4, it really does tie back to the run defense quietly being an issue. And this was an issue, by the way, throughout the season, even before Aiden Hutchinson got injured. Because if they can get into more 3rd and longs with the help of that run defense, then it'll be easier for those 4 to rush the passer. You know, they still don't have that guy opposite Aiden Hutchinson, another opposite pass rusher who's really emerged. Josh Pascal's still in the lineup. You mentioned Davenport, who was last year, got injured. But I think situationally they can help whoever it is opposite Aiden Hutchinson by putting them in just better spots in 3rd and longs.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Mina, he led, Hutchinson did, the Lions in sacks last season, and he only played 5 games all year. All right, meanwhile, another premier defensive player, the Bengals' Trey Hendrickson, still does not have a new deal. He's accounted for 39% of the Bengals sacks over the last 3 seasons. That's the most in the NFL. The next 2 players on that list, Myles Garrett and Max Crosby, and as you know, both those guys have signed extensions. Their average salaries $40 million and $35.5 million, respectively. Bengals star quarterback Joe Burrow has found himself now advocating for yet another teammate to get paid.
I think he's doing what he thinks is best for his career, and I support him in that. You know, Trey's a smart guy, just like anybody. You know, I'm sure there's things that he'd like to have back, but he's very well thought out in his process, and he's a guy that deserves to get paid and get paid what he wants and what the market is. So, you know, like I said, we'll see what happens with that. But, you know, I love Trey and hope he's with us.
I mean, Kevin, what do you make of Burrow having to publicly ask for a teammate to get paid, just like he did for Higgins and Chase?
Yeah, I'm going to talk to Joe Burrow directly here. Kids at home, earmuffs, don't listen to this. Bullying works, okay? Bullying is an effective tactic in this situation. The Bengals have been bullied into operating with some players like they haven't before. I think in a different era, they would not have signed T. Higgins to the deal that they did. Heck, they may not even sign Joe Burrow if he wasn't as special as he was. And so for me, I look at this team right now and I see Trey Hendrickson, top 5 since he got there in sacks, pressure rate, pressures. And I'm seeing a guy that any other team that's competing in the AFC would have locked up a couple of years ago. I look at the AFC and the contenders with those quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. Every other front office and ownership is more committed to winning. So Joe Burrow is using press conferences and publicity as a means to get what he wants. I love it. It's the only way they're going to change. Bullying works here.
Joe Burrow gets Trey Hendrickson paid. He may have to start taking a cut from all these contracts he's getting done with that bullying. I do think that Hendrickson has to be signed if they want to compete for a Super Bowl. But as they sort of explore what this defense looks like potentially without him early in the season, the secondary is the thing I keep coming back to because that's been the most disappointing part of this defense since the Super Bowl run. That team with Jesse Bates, even someone like Eli Apple who came in, off the street and played corner for them in the Super Bowl, they were so good at matching routes, so good at avoiding the mental mistakes. Bates kind of cleaned up everything in the back. They have not had that with the young players they've had in the lineup. Dax Hill, their former first-rounder, moved from safety to corner. They liked him, but he tore an ACL after 5 games, never really replaced him. Cam Taylor-Britt, who they expected to be a really talented cornerback, has had good games, had some big plays, also been benched for stretches. Even last season was still being benched. They really need to get those young corners, those young safeties playing well because there's not really an alternative here. They kind of have to price in those guys because of how much they're paying Jamar Chase, how much they're paying T. Higgins, how much they're paying Joe Burrow, and hopefully for Bengals fans, how much they're paying Trey Hendrickson.
That's the crux of it, Bill. I mean, this is one of the worst defenses in football last year, both against the pass and the run. And for them to take a leap, they weren't particularly active in free agency outside of adding TJ Slayton. They need multiple young players at all 3 levels, quite frankly, to take a step forward, to improve their play, or the rookies, Shamar Stewart, Demetrius Knight, to play well. And that, to me, cuts to, I think, what the Bengals' biggest bet this offseason was that development, coaching, is going to be the difference. Lou Anarumo was a schematic genius, But those young players over the last few years haven't borne out from the draft. And you can say, well, maybe that's because they drafted the wrong players and maybe it's not Lou's fault. Perhaps. But the Bengals are hoping that their new defensive coordinator, Al Golden, coming from college in Notre Dame last year, can do a better job of developing them. And if he can't, it's hard for me to see a way forward for this defense to get out of the gutter with or without Trey Hendrickson.
Healthy Irish get all the way to the national championship game. I'll just reiterate that. And also, kids at home, do not listen to your Uncle Kevin. No. It's bad, unless you're Joe Burrow trying to get your teammates paid. That's the only time that bullying's good. Just want to be clear about that. Okay, well, in case you missed it, here's Cardinals wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. on his offseason as he prepares for year 2 in the NFL.
I definitely put on some pounds. I think I added some muscle to my body a little bit. Still just trying to see my body, feel throughout OTAs and throughout training camp, more so throughout OTAs, and then kind of get a specific weight to settle in, for training camp and go from there.
Is that something you wanted to do, or did the team want you to do that? A little bit of both?
Kind of just happened naturally, honestly. I don't know, college I didn't eat as much probably, and then started eating a little bit more, having more free time, I guess. But I've eaten obviously all the right things, some extra protein for sure.
Okay, I guess, lean chicken is doing him wonders there, eating more protein. Does bulking up really help his game?
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't skip a meal in college, so I'm not sure where that came from.
Healthier, I guess.
Yeah, does bulking up help his game? I don't know. I'm not sure that's what he was missing last year. Last year, he had the most uncatchable targets in the entire NFL. I think that's a lack of chemistry with Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray's not an inaccurate quarterback. Maybe Marvin wasn't where he was supposed to be on all of those routes. I don't know. But what I do know is he was one of 6 wide receivers who are rookies to have 880 yards and 8 touchdowns over the past decade. So this is not a bust. This is not Jalen Reagor. This is a guy who's on track to perform this year. I expect big things.
Yeah, only Brian Thomas Jr. had more receiving yards than him among the rookies last season. I think he looks great. Yeah. All right, on to New Orleans. The Saints voted to keep the tush push. Here is their new head coach, Kellen Moore, on his thoughts.
I feel like it's a play that ultimately, one team or a couple teams have invested a ton of time into, put a lot of work into it, and they've been able to capitalize on it. But, every team's, it's just like any other play. It's available to everyone. Certainly I've had great experience with it, but again, it's an investment. It's a play that obviously Philadelphia has done a great job of investing a lot of time into, spending a lot of time, embracing that play. And so, there's a skill component to it as well that we just got to evaluate.
I mean, Bill, coming off a Super Bowl, you got to think some teams don't want to look petty, right, and vote against it. But what are your thoughts about the tush push living on for now?
Yeah, Kellen said the skill component matters here, and the fact that the Eagles do it much better than anybody else in the NFL who's tried tells you it's a skill thing and it's not some gimmick. But I do think we have seen teams around the NFL give it some thought, especially when there was a conversation about it being banned. How do we shift things? How can we change this to